It's important, I think, to say that certainly for the later Christian tradition, Isaiah is the greatest of the prophets. There are passages in the book which were traditionally taken in Christianity as kind of almost directly predicting the future coming and the future work of Jesus Christ. So much so that sometimes Isaiah was referred to in the Christian tradition as the fifth gospel. Well, the book of Isaiah is the longest of the major prophetic books of the Old Testament. Prophets, essentially, in the Old Testament are understood as people who speak as messengers of the God of Israel, bringing a particular message at particular times, in particular circumstances, often in situations of great crisis. Anyone who's perhaps familiar with occasionally attending church at Christmas time might have heard passages from the book of Isaiah read out, what were traditionally taken as prophetic predictions of the birth of Christ. There's a famous one in chapter 9 of the book of Isaiah, for instance, that speaks of, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." And not surprising that those are the kind of passages then which made a huge impact on the Christian consciousness through the centuries, that were taken up in a work like Handel's Messiah. Many of the words of Handel's Messiah are drawn from passages in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah himself lived in the later part of the 8th century BC. It was a time of great political ferment, a time of great political upheaval in the land of Israel and the surrounding territories. The major imperial power at that time was the Assyrian Empire, and it was during Isaiah's life that the kingdom of Israel in the northern part of Palestine was actually destroyed by the Assyrians. The much smaller southern kingdom of Judah, to which Isaiah himself belonged, with its capital in Jerusalem, remained in existence for the time being. Eventually it too would be destroyed by another great imperial power, the power of the Babylonians. But Isaiah himself is working through those tumultuous years of upheaval in the late 8th century, believing that the God of Israel was in fact, and this is one of the strange things about the major prophets of the Old Testament, that the God of Israel was about to punish and destroy the kingdom of Judah because of what is taken in the book to be its unfaithfulness to its special relationship with God. The later parts of the book then, from chapter 40 onwards, don't come to us from the 8th century prophet Isaiah himself. It's usually argued that chapters 40 to 55 of the book come from one or perhaps more than one later prophet during the time of the Jewish exile in Babylon in the 6th century. In other words, around 150 years or more after the time of Isaiah himself. And whereas Isaiah's message in the earlier century had been very much a message of how God was about to punish and destroy, to judge the kingdom of Judah for its unfaithfulness in relationship with him, chapters 40 to 55 of the book fundamentally have a message that the people are now about to be restored. It's important to understand that we're not necessarily saying here that every word in chapters 1 to 39 of the book come from Isaiah himself, whereas chapter 40 onwards come from later writers. In fact, there's a great deal of material in chapters 1 to 39 that do not come to us from Isaiah himself, but come much more probably from later kind of prophetic figures in the history of Israel. But all of them, in one way or another, seem to have links, linguistic links, thematic links, and so on. But the final chapters of the book, the final section of the book, chapters 56 to 66, again have a slightly more ambiguous sense to them. Here, the people are back in Judah, they're back in Jerusalem, the exile is over, and yet people still wonder about God and about their relationship with God. We don't know all that much about Isaiah himself. There are various speculations. It's sometimes been speculated that he was a rather aristocratic figure within the society of ancient Jerusalem. That's an assumption rather than a clear fact. Generally speaking, we don't know very much personally about the prophets, because the prophets' concern in the books is always really to emphasize the content of their message. If they understood themselves to be the messengers of the God of Israel, then it's not surprising that they tend not to focus on or to give as much information about themselves. Okay, how does the book of Isaiah come to be in our Bible as we read it now in an English translation? Well, that is a long and a complex and a fascinating story, as you might imagine. Whether Isaiah himself began the process of writing down some of his words, we just don't know. The norm with prophets in the Old Testament seems to be that they originally spoke by word of mouth their messages. They or their immediate followers may have begun the process of writing down their words. But as I'm suggesting, for a book like Isaiah, and this will be true for other prophetic books as well, we're not just dealing with the words of the original prophet in his own time. We're dealing with the way in which those words have then been copied and recopied, have been added to, have been expanded, have been reinterpreted for later situations in the life of the ongoing people of Israel. The book of Isaiah, as we have it, came to be translated into Greek. It came to be translated, of course, into Latin. Eventually, it also came to be translated into English. And the period of the Reformation, really, in the 16th century AD, is the great period for the beginning of the major translations of the Bible into English. Most famously, of course, the authorized version, the so-called King James version of 1611,